everyone, and welcome back to my channel, Coloring and Comments, a channel where I color in mandalas and talk to you about various topics that are on my mind. And today we'll be talking about fantasy bonds. Very few of us can claim that we've had the perfect childhood. There are moments where we look back and hope or wish that certain events didn't take place or that things happened differently. There are even times we wish that our parents protected us or cared for us in a different way. I was raised by a single mom, and I know that my mom did the best that she could to provide for her family. I know that she did her best to create a sense of safety and stability within the household. But I still look back at moments when she was always working and the 6-year-old me just wanted to spend time with her and would get so frustrated that I couldn't. As an adult, I now wish that things were slightly different. I wish that I was exposed to a different type of parenting, and I'm not saying that I do not appreciate the way that my mom raised me. I really love my mom, and I know she's done so much for me to get me to where I am today. But that feeling of anger that I mentioned before when I was a child, that feeling of anger and discomfort, I now understand that watching my mom leave for work as a 6-year-old child and not spending time with me, and this may sound selfish, but it made me feel very angry. It made me feel unloved, and it made me feel like my feelings were not valid in that moment. You see, the parenting we receive as children influences the way that we treat ourselves as adults. And I, for one, know that I have internalized the way in which my mom used to parent me as a child, or I've internalized my mom's parenting skills. I'm constantly working, and one of the hardest things for me is slowing down, taking time off. And this is because I feel like I'm being lazy. I feel like I'm being selfish. Like, why are you taking time off when you're not being productive? You have to be productive all the time. And that's the thing. The consequences of the way in which we were parented as children manifests in the way we treat ourselves. And it manifests in this way because of something called fantasy bonding. See? The term fantasy bonding was coined by psychologist Robert Firestone, and it refers to this illusion of safety and security and stability that we create. So basically a defense mechanism that we create when we find ourselves in situations when we were children that were so overwhelming, so scary, that we didn't know how to react in that moment. And what we did instead of reacting, because children oftentimes do not know how to deal with situations presented to themselves, is that in that instance, as children, we internalized our parents in the sense that we created this parent that is more stable, that can give us security, that can give us the care that we want. And by internalizing that parent, in that moment, or from then onwards, we then became both the parent and the child. And we'll soon get to the point of how this creates a lot of issues going forward. But backtracking a bit. See, when we internalize our parents, we not only take on how they viewed us, but we also take on how they react and respond to various situations that they find themselves in. And because as children, we are inclined to believe that our parents are perfect, And because of that belief, we start to think that there are actions or inactions to what we are doing or feeling is a result of the flaws within us as the child and not something the parent may have done wrong. The internalized parent that we create, not only through the fantasy bonding, but the one that we also internalize when we are being parented by our parents, starts to dictate the inner voice that we have as adults. So this inner voice starts to adapt and is shaped by what we experienced with our parents. So it starts to criticize us in the same way. It starts to carry the same attitude as the attitude we experience as children from our parents. And so it creates this battle, because one part of it, the inner voice, which we'll then call the inner parent, continues to say, you're not good enough, you're not skinny enough, why don't you do this, why don't you do that, you are problematic. And the inner child responds by trying to live up to that inner parent's expectations. The inner child starts doing things and saying things to prove that they are indeed good enough, that they are indeed skinny enough, that they can do this and that and that, and that they are enough. And this constant battle that takes place within ourselves sooner or later starts to affect our external world. And it affects our external world in two ways. The one is that we start to take on the traits of our parents because we see ourselves as them. We start to act and respond to situations that we find ourselves in the same way that they would act and respond. An example I'll give you, and this is an example that I mentioned in the beginning of this video, and that's how hard my mom worked. So my mom worked very hard, and she was raising a whole family by herself, and there was never a day that I can remember that my mom complained about working. My mom worked until she retired at the age of 65. So I always find myself working very hard to prove that I too can work at the same pace as my mom that my mom worked when she was younger. But also I find it very hard to articulate that I'm overwhelmed or that I'm tired, because I feel like I shouldn't complain, because my mom didn't complain when she was taking care of a whole household. So if she didn't complain when she had to take care of an entire household, what gives me the right to complain? The second way in which the internal battle manifests is we start to rebel against the traits of our parents, and we rebel because we want to show that we are nothing like them. We don't have anything in common with this person that has made your life very difficult in some shape or form. And I don't know about you, but the way I have, or an example that I can give about myself of rebelling, is that I really love children. I think growing up, a lot of times I thought I'd be a mom at a very young age. But then I stopped wanting to be a mother. And I stopped wanting to be a mother not because I don't love children, but because I never want to put my children in a situation where they feel like they are unloved or unwanted because I'm constantly working. And the only way that my mind has found a way to work around that trait that I learned from my parent is to not have children. And might not seem logical. I mean, my psychologist would always say, like, learn how to rest. Don't give up having kids. But in this moment, my truth is that is the only way that I know how to handle that. But regardless of how this internal battle may manifest, whether it's by rebelling or adopting those traits, we still remained caged by the way in which we're parented. And Lisa Firestone, a clinical psychologist, explains it very well, explains why we still remain caged when she says the following. We continue to preserve their legacy, their being our parents' legacy, by putting ourselves down and by building them up. It's not because we think that our parents were perfect. We just think that our parents were better than they were. And we still believe that we are more inherently flawed than we are. So we still believe the criticisms that we endured as children. And the only way you can move forward from that is by breaking the fantasy bond. And it is difficult to do. And it's difficult to do because this bond that was created to give you a sense of stability, a sense of safety when you were a child. And by severing it, it feels as though you're taking away your own sense of safety, your sense of security, especially for your inner child. But if you don't sever that bond, you will remain, or we will remain, intrinsically connected, and in some instances even controlled by our parents' actions, as well as our parents' perspectives of ourselves. So if we want to live lives that are free and fulfilled, we need to break the bond. And we start breaking the bond by acknowledging that this bond exists, and it exists because of this pain and trauma that we have faced as children. And through that acceptance, we can then start the healing process, and we can then start growing. And here I'll pause and I'll encourage you, and I know I said it in other videos, but I really encourage you to have a look at my inner child playlist, because one of the sides of dealing with a fantasy bond is by showing the inner child that they are now safe, that they are now valid, they are now heard, and they do not need to be fearful, that it is now safe to be themselves, and they don't have to hold on to this illusion that they created in order to feel safe, because now they are indeed safe. But another thing that you can do is start or change the manner in which you self-parent. Self-parenting is where we develop our own mature and loving parent. So remember that inner parent that I initially talked about, the inner parent that's very critical, that always kind of reminds you where you're falling short. Well, with self-parenting, we replace that inner parent with a parent that's loving, with a parent that's mature, and a parent that is capable of wholeheartedly loving our inner child. And by fostering this relationship that is healthy and loving, that allows the inner child to feel protected, and also gives you a sense of knowing how to parent yourself, that fantasy bond diminishes, and then you can therefore be free within yourself. But if you'd like to hear more about self-parenting and how you can go about to start self-parenting yourself in a very positive way, just leave me a comment down in the comment section and give this video a like, and then I'll definitely know to make that our next video so we can explore that concept in further detail. But before I end this video, I'd like to hear from you. How, if in any manner, has fantasy bonding affected your life, affected the way that you look at yourself, the way you speak to yourself, and the way that you carry yourself through this journey called life? Make sure you like, comment, share, and subscribe. May your day be colorful, and wonderful. And I'll see you in the next one.